Hi guys, welcome to the channel. This is What If Goku Was in Fairy Tale. Before we start, remember to like and subscribe to help the channel. Also check the description for the creator of the fanfic. Chapter 33. The Red Key Part 2. Hell's Bells. Kagura was entering her third hour of key training, and she finally believed she was making some progress. For a change of scenery, her two temporary teachers had taken her down to the beach and sat her down on the sand facing the water. There she meditated, searching deep within herself beyond her magical core to try and tap into the trickle of ki that she knew lay dormant inside of her. She had caught sight of it before, a trickle of gold lying in wait within a pool of turquoise. Now ever so slowly she was homing in, tracking it back to its source. Her focus was so complete that she was able to completely tune out the carnage behind her. Being on a beach meant that there was very little in the surrounding area to be destroyed. That still didn't stop the spar between Goku and Urza from turning a fifth of the nearby beachfront to glass. Urza stood clad in her purgatory armor with its massive weapon across from Goku, standing in a relaxed ready stance with his hands blazing with ki. Come on Urza, you don't think you're going to hit me with that, do you? I don't think it should be too much of an issue. I know your fighting style as well as you know mine after all. She lunged forward and Goku flipped straight over her to avoid the oversized weapon. Is that why you broke out the big suit so fast? I was kind of expecting you to go for some of the ranged stuff first. Goku fired a quick ki blast at Urza's exposed back, only for the girl to bat the attack aside and charge forward once more. Please. We both know that you have the advantage at ranged combat, especially since you can now fly as well. No, close quarters is my best option. For now anyways. Goku's hands ignited and he caught the weapon between his palms with a grimace. For now, Urza's muscles flexed as she pushed her blade down and Goku was forced back a step. A small trickle of blood started down his arm from his contact with the blade. My next suit of armor is nearing completion apparently. Based on what I have seen so far, it shall outpace every other suit that I have ever worn by quite a large margin. Goku suddenly released his hold and sidestepped Urza's overhead blow. Before she could react, he darted in and rammed his fist into her armored chest hard enough to force the air from her lungs. That sounds like a challenge. Urza's foot shot out and caught the side of Goku's knee, stunning him long enough for her to bring the pommel of her weapon around to catch him in the side of the head. If you wish it to be. I will of course need to test out its capabilities and an opponent will be warranted. I'm afraid that I cannot guarantee your safety, but alas, that is a sacrifice I am willing to make. Goku's punch to the jaw caught her completely off guard, especially when it exploded. Huh, I don't know if I've heard you this confident before. He remarked as she picked herself up off the ground. Your talk of that new move yesterday gave me a few ideas for add-ons that should work quite well for the armor. I do have to keep up with you after all. The two began to circle, looking for a new opening to exploit. Hey, well, you know me, I'm always up for a challenge. The two tensed simultaneously, preparing to charge forwards when a small sphere of yellow energy impacted the sand between them. The two turned to see Kagura panting heavily with sweat covering her brow and a smile on her face. I think I'm ready for the next lesson. She panted. Urza's purgatory armor vanished in a flash of light and Goku allowed his ki to settle down to its resting state. Wow, that was pretty good. I didn't think you'd be capable of doing ki blasts like that for a while, but you already got it. I guess we are just moving right along then. Let's see, I guess next we should. Goku paused for a second as something tickled the edge of his senses. He picked up his train of thought that he just managed to cover up his mistake. Actually, we've been at this for a while, it's almost noon, and noon is lunchtime. We can break for that. You two can head back over towards the guild. I need to go grab my cash from my house real quick and I'll meet you there. Make sure you save me some good stuff. And with that Goku suddenly took off in the sky and vanished over the tree line. Urza blinked shrewdly in his direction. That is going to take some getting used to. Goku touched down next to the cloaked figure just loud enough to alert the man of his arrival. Neither moved for a long moment, though Goku did have to continuously flex his ki in order to shrug off his sleep-inducing aura. Long time no see Mistogen, or should I call you Jello? He said it with his familiar, friendly tone, but both men knew that he was geared up for a fight. There was an underlying tension in his voice, and the air was slowly growing thick with the feeling of his ki. Mistogen slowly shrugged all of his staffs onto the ground before stepping away from them with his hands held up in the air. Ah, I am Jello, but not the one that you know. I have been using the persona of Mistogen to avoid the connection to that man. Then who are you? I'm sorry, but I am afraid that is my business. Nonetheless, rest assured that I mean neither you nor Urza harm. The two men stood staring at one another for a moment. Goku looked into the man's eyes searching for something, and Mistogen matched his gaze with a level stare. Slowly Goku nodded. I'll accept that. I know you were far too injured in the Phantom War to have been the Jello at the tower. Goku shrugged. Either way, I can sense where you are now. If you hurt her or any of my friends, I want you to know that I can find you. And with that he vanished back into the sky. Mistogen watched the teen disappear with a heavy heart. That's exactly what I'm trying to avoid. So Kana, who do you think will be the biggest issues here? Lucy whispered to her servant. The greatest threat currently within the city is likely Urza Scarlet Mistress. She has the greatest mental fortitude, she might be able to resist your influence. Kana pointed her fork over towards the redhead in question as she shoveled an oversized bit of meat into her mouth. Lucy took a single look at the girl and snorted. Doubt it. The blonde snorted. Next. Son Goku is at least as strong and stubborn as Urza. However, he lacks the mind for strategy. Natsu Dragneel and Grey Fullbuster are the next most powerful, but they are both headstrong and easily angered. As a dragon slayer, Natsu might have some resistance to your powers, but Grey should fall easily. Mirajan and Ethelman are both takeover mages, so they are used to foreign presences attempting to override their own brains. However, Mirajan currently lacks the power to utilize her magic. Once she falls, Elfman will attack recklessly and will be easily subdued. Levi has a keen mind and a versatile power, but she is physically weaker than all of the other powerful mages in the guild. The other blue-haired girl next to her is new, but she is an S-class water mage and quite dangerous. I don't know enough about her mental fortitude to tell you about it. Anybody else here is too far beneath my own level to be a threat. As the pair continued to chat in the corner, Goku walked in and came to an immediate halt. There was a dark taint floating through the air. Urza immediately noticed his expression and her hand slowly slipped down to grip the hilt of her sword. Kagura looked between the two and she soon found herself following suit. Across the hall, Mirajan's eyes narrowed to sharp slits and she stalked her way towards the three as they uneasily congregated around a table in the center of the room. Across the town, the old church clock tower's hands finally reached noon. The ancient gears revved up and a massive hammer struck the side of the bell. Like every other day, the sound echoed across the city. Dong, Lucy and Kana rose from their seats and started across the room on opposite sides of the hall. Dong Mirajan reached Goku's side and hurriedly whispered in his ear. You feel it too, right? Something is wrong. Dong, I feel it, but I don't know what it is. It's slippery. I can't lock it down. Dong Elfman saw his sister's expression and slowly stomped over to her side and began to look around the room himself. The rest of the group slowly closed together. The rest of the guild was beginning to catch on to the tension in the air and look around nervously. Dong. Something seemed wrong with Kana earlier. She seemed off. Mirajan said tightly. Goku nodded and let his senses stretch over towards the approaching brunette. Dong, his ki reached out for her, and slid right off. There was a dark bubble surrounding the girl, suppressing her completely. It was as though he was at her through the side of an airtight jar. Dong, a single look at Goku's widening eyes was enough for Mira. She gave a sharp nod to her brother and the next moment the man was tackled Kana to the floor. Dong muttering erupted throughout the guild and Mira was yelling for order, but Goku was tuned it all out. He forced his probe deeper, trying to see past the aura surrounding her. Dong, nothing he did could punch through, his power was insufficient. So he turned it up. The entire guild fell silent at the sudden violent red aura that filled the room, and Urza quickly stepped forward, intent on stopping him as quickly as possible. Dong, several things all happened at once in the next moment. Goku finally pushed through and was instantly able to track the tendril of darkness back to its source. As he spun around with a warning on his lips, Lucy reached the redhead's side and casually poked her finger up against the girl's temple. Her finger flashed red and Urza collapsed like a ragdoll. Dong, W-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. Urza's shrill cry paralyzed the entire room. All except for Lucy, who merely grinned and dug her finger in even deeper. Dong, pain, agony, anguish, torture, suffering, torment, misery, agonize, excruciation, everything Urza knew, everything she felt, it was all nothing but pain. Her entire world was lit up in absolute agony. Every single nerve in her body had been triggered at once. Peinaganyangwushterter suffering terminmiserjagonize excruciation. Every negative, awful, or even just unpleasant memory she had was suddenly front and center, magnified 1,000 times over. Peinaganyangwushterter suffering terminmiserjagonize excruciation. Her pleasant memories were quick to follow. Each and every good memory, good feeling that she had ever experienced were pulled forth one by one and they were corrupted. Pain leaked into each and every one, putting every positive experience in her life into a shadow of misery. Mental torture went hand in hand with the physical and there was just no stopping it. It burned a relentless path straight through her brain and she couldn't even begin to fathom how to make it stop. Peinaganyangwushterter suffering terminmiserjagonize excruciation. Stop, the word suddenly echoed through her brain and for a brief moment her pain ceased. Instantly her mind was racing to try and figure out what had happened, but the moment her thoughts started back up, the pain returned. Peinaganyangwushterter suffering terminmiserjagonize excruciation. Stop fighting. Once again the pain stopped, but this time the respite was accompanied by a feeling of absolute bliss. The warm feeling floated through her body like a pink fog. But, no, she was a fairy tale wizard. She couldn't just stop fighting because Peinaganyangwushterter suffering terminmiserjagonize excruciation. Submit BLISSPLEASUREHAAPPINESS. No. She was a warrior. She couldn't just Peinaganyangwushterter suffering terminmiserjagonize excruciation, but she. Peinaganyangwushterter suffering terminmiserjagonize excruciation. Obey BLISSPLEASUREHAAPPINESS. But obey, submit, surrender, bliss, bliss, obey, submit, surrender. Good girl. Now, kneel. Urza's scream echoed through the building for 5 seconds before it abruptly cut off and she fell to her knees. Goku blurred across the room faster than most could track, picking up the girl and carrying her across the room away from the smirking blonde. Lucy was instantly surrounded as over 24 mages jumped into position with their magic blazing. Enchanted guns were cocked, fire and frost filled the air, water was summoned, and bestial instincts were called forth. A symphony of powers echoed throughout the room and Lucy stood within it like the eye of a hurricane. Every single eye was trained on her, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Mirajan stared at the thing impersonating her friend coldly. Surrender. Only warning. The temporary guild master snarled. Lucy chuckled. No. Every single eye in the guild was trained on Lucy. That left them completely vulnerable. When Elfman had transformed into the beast, for a brief instant he was forced to loosen his grip on her arms to keep from crushing her bones. It was enough. He never noticed the delightful little card she had palmed until it exploded in his face. The beast reared back with a pained roar and suddenly Kana was moving. She slammed an electric card onto Biska's forehead before anyone could even think to react. Alzak's vengeful cry was silenced just as quickly as a corrosive cloud exploded out of her second card and turned his weapon to slag. Kana did a split to duck beneath a beam of Grey's ice and the blast caught Elfman full in the face just as he recovered. Natsu's fist caught fire and he lunged forward, only for an electrified whip to catch him around the wrist. Natsu turned to see Lucy's smirking grin before she flipped her wrist and sent him crashing into Happy and Macau. Her sword transformed into an electrified spear that she drove straight into Juvia's stomach. The girl was able to avoid being impaled by turning to liquid, but the sudden burst of magic coursing through her system turned her into a puddle on the ground. Across the room Goku saw Urza's eyes flutter open. Reassured of her status he spun around to launch himself into battle. Urza slowly rose to her feet beside him and switched to her speedy flight armor. She kicked out, spinning Goku around and looked him dead in the eye as her blade opened him up from hip to shoulder. Goku's eyes were wide with disbelief as his strength fled his body. He took a slight, unsteady step in her direction and slipped on his own blood and collapsed onto his knees. You can thank Kana for that, she made a wonderful test subject. We spent the entire night working on that spell together. Has bits of time manipulation in there, 4 whole weeks of torture compressed into the span of a half-dozen seconds. Don't worry if you feel curious, you'll all get to experience it soon enough. Lucy's cheerful tone sent icy tendrils of fear racing through more than one experienced mage. So when Lucy nodded at her second slave, they were too slow to react. Urza grabbed her best friend of 10 years by the hair and spun in a quick circle to launch him straight towards Lucy's outstretched arms. She caught him with an eager grin and brought her glowing finger up towards his temple. Kagura was the first to shake through the shock. With a flick of her fingers Lucy and her captive suddenly found their gravity reversed. For a brief moment Goku floated free. Then Urza joined the battle for real. Her elbow crashed into Kagura's side, her foot caught Mira in the nose, and Jet and Droy were blasted onto the second floor merely from the wind pressure of a single swing of her sword. As Kagura hit the floor, Goku came back down right into Lucy's clutches. Her finger made contact with his head and everything went dark. Lucy frowned suddenly as her magic circulated through Goku's head. His brain felt wrong. It was nothing like Urza or Kaina's, those were human brains. Human brains, she understood. With the right application of pain and pleasure, any single one would crumble in no time at all. But this brain, it wasn't human. It was more primal, more savage, with a longing for combat that even some of the more vicious demons couldn't match. To pain and pleasure alike, his brain responded to the foreign presence the exact same way. Fight. Lucy pushed more magic into his brain in an attempt to push straight through his defenses. She found herself standing on the palm of a massive primate. It stared down at her with blood-red eyes and its massive tail flicked from side to side in irritation. Then its enormous maw opened wide and with a ground-shattering roar everything suddenly went white. Raa. Ha! Goku's ki surged back in an explosion of white and blasted Lucy clear across the room. The room was filled with the hiss of burning flesh as Goku cauterized his own wound into an angry red scar. Across the room, Kaina rolled free of a word trap set by Levi and threw a card straight towards the martial artist's unprotected back. Goku felt the weapon coming and responded appropriately. His tail exploded out from his back and snagged the piece of paper right out of the air and returned it to sender. Kaina dived out of the way of her exploding card and Levi capitalized on the opening. The word Ram appeared in the air and crashed into the brunette's side, launching her into the wall besides her mistress. Urza immediately disengaged from her 6-on-1 battle with a small contingency of fairies and took up position to shield her darkened comrades from harm. As Goku's aura settled around him, the two sides squared off. The fairies were still standing, having shielded one another from Urza's wrath. Juvia had begun to reform, her torso sticking out of the floor and anger in her eyes. Elfman's face was smoking, but he looked none the worse for wear as he rallied himself. They gathered around the bar behind Goku while the possessed and the corrupted stood beside the stage. Interesting, Lucy said with a hint of wonder. You aren't human, you aren't demon. You aren't any subspecies or race that I've ever heard of, what are you? When this is all over, I think that I'll have to cut you open. There's so much that I can learn. Everybody stay back. We are getting in each other's way more than we're actually hurting them. Mirajan called out. Goku, restrain Urza. Natsu, burn up every single card Kaina has before she gets a chance to use them. Everybody left standing. If you are an A or B rank, you're after Lucy. C and lower, try and help out the wounded. Lucy let out a loud, dramatic sigh and pointed tiredly at the white-haired girl. You talk too much. A beam of red light shot across the room from her fingertip and struck Mira straight in the forehead. Painagon anguished her suffering Terminmiser Yaganai's excruciation. Elfman watched in horror as his sister twitched once and sank to her knees with an expression of unfathomable sorrow. I'm so sorry for causing you distress, mistress. Please forgive your pathetic servant for daring to question you. Mira whispered uncertainly. Her younger brother stared helplessly at her. It just couldn't register in his mind. The strongest, most headstrong person he knew, the one he respected above all others, she was suddenly gone in a single moment and there was nothing but an empty shell left in her wake. With the animalistic urges of the beast already hovering in the back of his psyche, the image was all it took to drive him utterly mad. The beast rushed forwards, growing with each step until his head was scraping the ceiling as he went in for a massive, crippling punch. Lucy caught it bare-handed and threw him straight through the back wall. Her whip quickly followed and wrapped around his throat with enough electricity running through it to take down a full-grown elephant. The monstrous teen shuddered violently and went still. Mirajan took the opportunity to quickly dash across the room and took cover by her mistress's side. She never even gave her brother a second glance. Goku'd had enough. Gray, we're playing defense. Ice up shields, keep those red beams away from everybody. We don't know who they will and won't affect. Natsu, you're still on Kaina duty. Don't give her the chance to set up. Kagura, Juvia, keep Urza off me. I'm ending this now. He stalked across the room with his aura crackling. The earth itself seemed to shudder with each and every step and the ladies around Lucy tensed as they prepared for combat. The blonde waved them down and began to stalk across the room herself. You three only attack if they attack first, understand? I won't need your help for this. They met at the very center of the guild. The older, more experienced warrior stared down at the endlessly smiling blonde. Then he buried his fist into her gut. The girl stumbled back in surprise at the sudden blow and lashed out with a punch of her own. Goku ducked beneath it, kicked her in the face, and then grabbed her by the back of the head and slammed her nose first into a nearby table. "What?" the blonde stuttered. "You're a lot stronger than you were yesterday," said Goku, almost conversationally. "Any one of those hits would have knocked you out before. The power behind that punch, you're easily on my level, maybe a bit higher. But you have no idea how to fight hand to hand. You're just messing around because you think nobody can hurt you." Goku cracked his knuckles. "I'm going to show you just how wrong you are." Lucy eyed the teen for a moment and calmly wiped the blood from her nose. "Okay, I'll be serious then." She caught Goku's next punch between two fingers, pulled him in close and smashed her forehead against his own. Goku stumbled back in pain and took a blast of red energy to the chest for his trouble. He blurred out of sight before Lucy could move again, bouncing all around the guild hall at speeds that most couldn't track. Lucy's eyes darted around following his movements and ducked his attack from behind the moment he moved into attack. She spun around to retaliate and found herself face to face with a glowing yellow ball of ki. The fairy tale contingent cheered as Lucy peeled herself off the wall and Goku gave a tiny nod of acknowledgement towards his fellows before he allowed his mind to sink back into the flow of battle. He was keeping his cool, but he could already tell that her powers surpassed his own. Not only that, but she was still getting stronger. Whatever had taken over Lucy, it wasn't used to her power yet, she wasn't used to how her body was responding. As time goes on, she would grow more accustomed to her new abilities and she would become deadly. This fight had a time limit going and it was counting down far faster than the warrior was comfortable with. There was no time to play around. RAAAA. The middle of the room became a twister as Goku's power hit its peak. Then he vanished and Lucy was launched into the air. She was pinballed around the room by an invisible force, bounced off the walls, crashed against the ceiling, and struck again and again until her entire body more resembled a giant bruise than an actual person. After a solid 5 minutes, Goku reappeared and allowed Lucy to slide to the ground. His gaze slid from her prone form to the three women standing in shock along the back wall. "Okay, so are you guys going to give up or do my friends and I have to beat you up first?" he asked. Then Lucy Whip came up, caught him around the throat and slammed him into the ceiling with a burst of blue electricity. She rose up to her feet with two objects in her hand. The red key glowed side by side with the golden celestial key, yellow mixing with red to release a putrid brown into the air. "Open, Gate of Corruption. Corrupted Gate of the Bull, Taurus. Moo." The creature that emerged from the portal looked nothing like the black and white perverted minotaur had harassed so many of the local girls. Instead, it was a towering creature that's head almost touched the ceiling. A shaggy monstrosity with cute green fur, horns the size of claymores, and a wooden club littered with vile-looking metal spikes and wrapped with barbed wire. Goku pulled himself from the ceiling and ripped the whip away from him. He landed before the massive beast in a ready stance. Lucy's wounds were already healing, her bruises were gone, any cuts and scrapes were sealing up, and her power was on the rise once more. But before he could do anything else, the bull man would have to fall. "Guys, light him up." Over 24 spells flew over his head and crashed into the monster's chest. There was a flash, a bang, and then there was a smoking crater on the ground where the bull had previously stood. "Oh," Lucy blinked, puffing out her cheeks in disappointment. "That really didn't last long at all, did it? I was sort of expecting more out of him. But I suppose that's what I get for picking one of the lesser spirits. Let's see, which one should I pick next? Quadruple A." As Lucy was reaching down for the next key, Goku blazed forward and slammed his fist into her jaw. Her teeth crashed closed with a loud clack, and a bit of bloody flesh tumbled through the air. Rock. Lucy's body was already regenerating the flesh it had just lost, but she was nowhere near recovered enough to defend against the sudden jab into her eyes. Scissor. Spitting blood and blinded, Lucy was utterly helpless as the final blow came in. Paper. The open palm strike caught Lucy dead on in the chest, forcing his ki straight through her body. The air rocketed from her lungs, blood exploded from her mouth, and her heart skipped a beat as his power sent her crashing back into Miragen. Then the entire room was bathed in blue. Kamehameha. Urza leapt in front of the attack and slammed the shield halves of her adamantium armor together. The green glow of the seal took the beam head on and Goku frowned as he watched his attack fade away into nothing. On the plus side though, Lucy had finally stopped smiling. "Crazy bastard. Doesn't this body belong to one of your friends? Are you actually trying to kill her?" "To be fair, I don't really know her." Goku shrugged. "Like, at all. But I do know that she's a fairy." I know she'd rather we do whatever it takes to stop you rather than let you have your way. Mostly, I was just trying to figure you out. Figure me out, Lucy echoed, quirking an eyebrow. You were experimenting. It never takes me long to figure out how my opponent fights. But you're still trying to figure out what you can do as well, so it's a little harder than normal to pin you down. Your power is greater than mine now, but you still don't know how to use it. Goku cracked his neck. You can't win. Now tell me, who are you? Me. Just a lesser demon, class 3 to be precise. I'm called Flute. I'm the one that figures out how all the new toys work so that everybody can get the best screams out of them. Once I've conquered your city, raised your guild, and taken all your friends, I can't wait to see what it will take to finally make you scream. I won't give you the chance to find out. It's not your decision to make. Urza, quantity over quality please. The redhead nodded and her defensive armor vanished in favor of the shining form of the Heaven's Wheel. Her hands were empty though, and there wasn't a single blade of any kind anywhere near her. Instead she just stood with her arms outstretched, aimed at the free fairies. For several seconds nothing happened and the people crouching behind Gray's ice barricades began to mutter in confusion. Then every single weapon that they might have carried was enveloped in a white light. Confusion was replaced by panic and with a twist of her wrist upwards, Urza sent every single weapon user in the guild rocketing up into the air. Kagura countered quickly, doubling her own gravity and anchoring herself to the floor. Everyone else was helpless as Lucy began to fire. Goku flew upwards to try and intercept some of the shots, but every time one connected their suspension was cut short and they dropped down on their former friends, attacking wildly. The guild quickly devolved into a frantic melee as everyone who was left struggled to stay free. Bisca fell down atop of Gray and his concentration slipped just in time for Kana to unleash every single blasting card that she had in her disposal. Natsu unleashed a torrent of flames, but some slipped through and the barricade was shattered. A beam of scarlet light shot through the shards of ice and scattered water everywhere. Panagon Yanguishterder suffering Miser Yagonize excruciation. Shit, this is looking bad guys, we're running out of people. Gray shouted as he tried to re-establish their defense. Urza's Flame Empress armor tore through his icy shields as fast as he could put them up though, and the shirtless teen was forced to dive out of the way as one of Lucis' torture magic blasts almost clipped him in the shoulder. Natsu was laughing manically as he charged through the guild hall, taking down every single person that came after him. 3 bursts of the torture magic struck him in the chest and his grin only widened when he failed to feel anything. Ha, you think a little flash of light is enough to take a dragon slayer down? Natsu cackled. Come on Goku, let's take them all down with one blow. Natsu punched outward, engulfing Kana in a massive fireball. The resulting explosion finally knocked the brunette out of the fight, but Natsu's celebrations were cut short as streams of water rose from the ground, coiled up his body and shoved their way down his throat. Natsu choked, his flames spluttering as his body heaved for air and his lungs filled with water. Natsu collapsed, his flames extinguished, and the water streamed upwards forming into Juvia. Drown the love rival, Juvia screamed, her head snapped around staring wildly at the other fairies. More love rivals, she screamed. Die. Juvia tore through the remaining fairies like a force of nature. None of their efforts fazed her, passing through her body like pebbles in a pond. With a simple swipe of her hand, the pipes beneath the floor shattered, forming geysers of water that knocked helpless fairies right into Lucis' line of fire. Levi didn't even have time to defend herself before she found herself airborne with a glowing red beam barreling towards her forehead. Panagon Yanguishterder suffering Miser Yagonize excruciation. She rose from the ground with a cruel grin on her face and her quill danced through the air. A massive phoenix, its wings tinted with black fire, erupted from the feather and caught Goku in midair. Completely blindsided by the suddenness of the attack, Goku's defenses were finally overwhelmed and he collapsed to the ground in a heap. The defenders of Fairy Tail were momentarily stunned as they watched their strongest remaining fighter fall. Levi was quick to capitalize on their hesitation. Chain Letters reached out and grabbed her teammates. Jet and Droy and the two quickly fell victim to Lucis' enslavement. And that spelled the end of the battle. Team Shadowgear's Unison Raid. Blazing Jungle ENCYCOPEDIA. Jet was not a powerful mage. In fact, he was easily one of the single weakest members of the guild. But he was without question the fastest. He vanished from sight with dozens of vines in his arms, each and every one covered with words of imprisonment. The guild found itself strangled in plant matter and the remaining fighters wasted no time in trying to cut their way free. But then Jet came to a halt in front of his mistress with a final vine in hand. The word channel was repeated over and over again across its length. With a smile, the girl poked the plant and everything went crimson. Painagon yanguishter suffering terminmiser yaganize excruciation. 5. When the smoke cleared, only 5 fairies remained unbowed to the demon's will. Goku's unknown alien physiology. Natsu's dragon slayer magic. Gray's necklace, a small piece of his teacher sitting against his chest. Elfman's inner monsters. Kagura's soul link with her legendary sword. They had survived with their minds intact, but it was a hollow victory. Now these 5 kneeled, their heads bowed as their former friends stood around them. Now see, isn't this so much better? Lucy chuckled. Her wounds were completely gone as she stood before the final, battered members of the opposition. You all tried so hard to resist me. But it feels so much better to just give into the bliss. Isn't that right, my pets? It's just a shame that none of your friends here can allow themselves to experience it. Yes, Mistress Flute. The group chanted back to her, surrounding the beaten fairies. Goku was without question the worst off. The massive wound across his chest had opened once more and blood loss was becoming an immediate concern. His body was burned, bruised, and nearly broken. The rest were hardly any better. Between Urza and Juvia's overwhelming strength, the guild's massive brawl and Flute's incredible power, they were all lucky to be alive. Though, as Lucy's body dragged her eyes up and down their forms muttering about experiments, several of them thought that it was rather poor luck indeed. Guys, hold on tight. Goku suddenly said. Flute's muttering was cut short as she stared at the teen incredulously. Hold on tight, really? Flute cackled. What are you going to do? Carry them out the door? She laughed, her enslaved fairies quick to follow suit, even as Urza's eyes narrowed in suspicion. When Goku's hands started towards his face, her expression shifted quickly to alarm. Mistress, he's about to fire Dragon's Roar. Natsu's attack blasted towards Urza, distracting her as Goku raised his hands and blasted a hole in the ceiling. Then his hands dropped down to his face. Solar Flare. By the time Flute's fairy's sight recovered, the 5 were long gone. Thanks for listening. If you want the next part of this video, be sure to like, subscribe and comment and hit that bell notification. See you next time.